Student of Science, Dr. Moore. Going to give you a summary on this next lesson called Mentee Strategies, How to Leverage Your Resources. So when I was a student of science and I was really trying to navigate this new environment, because it's not like I grew up with parents that have a degree in math and science and understand that, I was kind of one of those students that studied people and really want to understand their thought and their processes of what the decisions that they made. And when I first started working in a lab, I remember that I worked in a lab where all the people in the lab were kind of working at a really, really high level. But there were some people in the lab that actually were doing really well. And I would go to them and be like, hey, so, when you were choosing your research project, like, what were you thinking about? Like, what was your approach? And I'm like, okay, all right, that makes sense. And then I would go to the person in the lab that wasn't doing that well. And I would ask them, so what were you thinking about when you chose your research project? Okay, I'm not gonna do that, I'm not gonna do that, I'm not gonna do that. Right? So this particular lesson focuses on really thinking about the information that someone gives you and being able to dissect it, because their personality does make a difference. Right? Because if I'm someone who's an introvert, and I'm saying you need to go in there to get an internship and just talk to the professor and tell them this and that, that may not work for you if you're someone who's an introvert, like, oh, I don't think I can pull that off. And it wouldn't be authentic to you. Now, regardless if you're an introvert or an extrovert, being able to talk to someone who's either different than you or thinks the same as you is just giving you additional information that you can sort through to figure out what is the best approach for you. And this particular lesson gives you a series of different tactics that you can do and think about, so when you are acquiring new information, you can do it in the right way that works for you. And when you do that, that puts you in the highest possibility and the chance to win. All right, so this lesson is going to be on Mentee strategies, how to leverage your resources. And I haven't done this workshop in a long time, but it's one of my favorite ones in a lot of ways, because it's the how do I get my hustle game on. So let me have Jonathan, go ahead and read that quote real quick. Oh, actually, no. What's happening in that illustration on top, Jonathan?
You're trying to boil water with a candle.
Okay, anything else?
Well, there's logs sitting right there. But you're using the candle instead.
And some matches, right?
Yes.
But this illustration, what do you think that the artist, the illustrator, is trying to convey with this image?
Looking to optimize your situation.
Okay, you have to optimize your situation. Anybody out there in virtual land wanna throw anything out there? Can you guys see this image? All right, maybe not. But sometimes we have tunnel vision when we're trying to reach our goal, and we don't see the landscape around us, and we don't see all the things around us that potentially could be resources for us. Right? And a lot of times, I'm not saying you guys, I'm saying other people, you may look at folks, sideline, judge them based on how they look and who you think they know, and where you think that they potentially can either help you or not. But it's that whole idea of how am I open to anybody and everybody, because I just don't know. I don't know who Stas knows. I don't know if Stas knows the CEO of Google, and but I'm being, I don't know, really shitty to Stas because, you know, he's not a good person to study with. And then all of a sudden, you know, I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to get this internship at Google, but I'm having a hard time. And Stas looking at me like, huh. Well, if he wasn't shitty to me, maybe I may use my leverage point, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I try not to burn no bridges. None. Because who's around this room and who's out there virtually, we don't know what they're going to be doing 5, 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. And some people can be real petty. Not y'all, but I'm saying other people, right? So, something to think about. All right, Vicky, go ahead and read that quote for us real quick.
With a keen intellect, awareness of your surroundings, courage to push your boundaries of vulnerability, and the wisdom to understand the oneness in all that exists, an individual can uncover resources from nowhere.
All right, so what am I trying to say in that quote, Vicky?
I think like being aware of your surroundings, pushing outside of like your comfort zone.
Why is that important to potentially push outside your comfort zone, Vicky? Because I'm pushing you right now outside your comfort zone on purpose. Go ahead.
I mean, it's a big world when you limit yourself to like your own little sphere and not try to like explore or like try to understand people that like you're not so fond of at first. It's like you limit yourself and your perspective, and you can't think as vastly.
Let me ask this question, even though this seems random. Who believes in miracles? By a show of hands. Out there in virtual land? Show of hands? Okay, they don't believe in them. But just believing in miracles or even believing in magic can allow things to manifest for you because you're open to the possibility. But if you don't believe, for sure, it's probably not going to happen, right? And even if something happens, you're going to be like, nah, that didn't happen. Let me give you an example. I remember one time I was at out there in Venice Beach on the boardwalk, and there was a homeless guy that was kind of, doing one of those, acts where he's trying to raise, money, So he had, this homeless guy had these 3 sticks and a table. And then what he did is he went around the crowd and passed these 3 sticks, the 3 kind of legs to a table, and he passed the circular part of the table so everybody could touch it and stuff like that. And then he had this block, right, this little kind of 6-inch, square block, 2 of them, and after he passed that around so everybody could touch it. So then he set the table up, he put the 3 legs there, he put the round table on top, and then he put the block and he put the 6-inch block on top of it. And then he moved 20 feet from the block. And he says, I'm going to knock this block off with my energy. Right? So, the whole crowd sitting around him, we're like, okay, let's stop, right? I'm like, this is going to be good. So anyway, he starts moving into, this stance, and he's like trying to like conjure some energy and stuff, right? And he did it for like 3 minutes. And right when you're in your mind, you were like, this fool is crazy. Nothing's gonna happen. The block came off. And I mean, it came off like this. It wasn't like someone threw a rock and it hit it. It straight came off like this. And so people were like, no, that didn't happen. I just seen it, but no, that didn't happen. So, me, I'm like, let me holler at you, because, I want to know how he did it, right? So I gave him some money, this and that. I was talking to him afterwards, and he's like, yeah. He goes, I trained up in the Himalayan mountains for 3 years on how to use my chi energy to move objects. And he says, a year from now, I'm going to be levitating bricks. Now, when you think about it, what we do know is that where we send our attention and our energy is what we're the best at. That's where we become experts in, where we give our attention and our energy, right? And someone who had maybe no other obligation from society that could 12 hours a day focus on that, maybe is the reason why he had that ability. If you believe in miracles, if you believe a miracle is just something that happened that you can't explain. But we live in a highly organized, mathematical, geometrical, sacred geometry state of existence where there's always a reason why it happened. You just don't know it. And everything exists, has some cycle to it, it has something that regulates to it. Like that's how our universe is created. But something to think about. Any thoughts? Any questions? Any comments? All right, finish that rest of that quote real quick. Because you just got to the being vulnerable part. Is there anything else you want to add to that in regards to? I'm pushing you past your boundaries of existence. What about the part where I say the oneness in all that exists? What do you think I'm trying to say there?
I guess like everything is connected in a way, and you were not really aware of, like you said, like you don't know who knows who, and like all the possibilities that you can unlock, like once you try to get to know like the people that you don't really notice in your everyday life.
Right. All right. So when these are just some tips that I'm going to throw out there that I want you guys to think about in regards to when you are engaged with somebody who is a, say, mentor, a supporter, someone who is giving you advice. These are things that I want you guys to begin to think about, right? Because, you know, I believe there's rules to the game, and these are my made up rules, but you know, you want to find out if they work for you and do you want to add or subtract from it, right? So the first thing is, what was the environment and or culture like during the time when that individual giving you advice gained their insight or experiences? Why do we believe potentially that may be important? The culture or the time around that person who's saying, you need to be doing this. Why potentially would that be important? Why do we think that's important? What do you think about, Yogi?
I think it might have to do with like some sense of the person understanding the situation that you are coming from, just because of the environment or culture. I guess like I'm thinking about our meeting the past week, how you understand where I am and where I'm trying to be, and so with that I take your advice seriously, and I try to understand your point of view compared to other situations where I've seeked help from others, and I've come to understand that those although those situations did seem right in the sense that I was getting the help I needed, they weren't giving me the correct information that I needed to succeed in the places where I wanted to. And as far as culture goes, I guess it's also similar. I think it's important to be around people in your from similar backgrounds. So like you said, over here we have 2 students in the same calculus class, and so from what they're going to learn, they can help each other out, get to where they want to be and where they need to be in their classes.
Okay, I like that. Now, is it always good to be around people of the same culture or different culture or both?
Different cultures, maybe. You get
Okay.
to like experience different things, learn about different outlooks.
So maybe based on the culture that you're from, you know, for me, African American, for you, whatever that culture may be, there's definitely going to be differences in how we perceive the world and the different traditions and rituals that we may have, right? And that may play into the advice that that person gives you. And one of the things I loved about going to school with people who were way different than me is I just learned a lot. You know, I learned why some of the Korean folks didn't like the Japanese people. I learned about Chinese culture. You know, I learned about things in Chinese culture that I'm like, damn, the women get treated like that. You know, the boys, they have, you know, like I just learned all these things that like I didn't know about because I'm not part of that culture. And I'm not judging any of it. I'm just absorbing it and learning. But that may shade the person's perspective or point of view. And you want to know that. Right? But also, from a timing standpoint, is the advice that that person giving you timeless? Or is it outdated? Right? You want to know, like, yeah, that happened 25 years ago, but that's not going to happen here now. Things are a whole lot different. Or, no, that's kind of human nature. That's going to kind of happen no matter what because that's kind of how people get down. Talk to me, y'all. What you guys thinking?
Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You know, it's something that people from older times would say that doesn't quite click with the current environment.
And what I'm also saying along with that is that we inherently got DNA from our parents, right? Stored in our DNA is their stuff too, right? DNA is more than the G's, the A's, the T's, and the C's. There's a whole lot stored in our DNA, right? In my DNA, I still have genes that have been activated because folks were in slavery and got beat down for hundreds of years. And that may be the reason why I have more propensity to high blood pressure. I'm just saying there's stuff stored in our DNA. And our ancestors went through things and have stored things in our DNA that may not be serving us now. Right? We have grandparents that are saying, oh, you shouldn't, but it's like, that's kind of different now, right? Folks, they may be in survival mode the same way that you are or were. But that still may be tainting what that person, what kind of advice they give to you. And my point is, should you be cognizant of that? Should you be weighing that as they give you an advice? Because Stotts may be telling me he wants to go to med school, right? And he wants to be a cardiac surgeon, and I'm a cardiac surgeon. So, but I went to med school 30 years ago. So I may not be the right person to talk to him about how to get into med school. He maybe need to talk to somebody who's a first or second year or third year. But maybe because I'm on the admissions committee for med school, maybe I have a different perspective that's current, right? But you're weighing that based on what the person is saying. But maybe I can talk to him more about what it is to be an extraordinary cardiologist because I'm still doing that right now. And my perspective is as such, right? But I'm trying to weigh all of that as I'm trying to listen to what this person may be giving me and shifting through it to figure out what I feel like I want to keep and what things I may not want to keep. What do you guys think? No questions, no thoughts?
I mean, what I'm getting from it is that you kind of want to pick and choose what advice you want to actually retain and actually listen to. And it's just a matter of filtering through like what is actually current and useful to today's date and not something that might be some idea of you.
And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you guys permission to do that with everybody. Everybody, your parents, your relatives, everybody. Because when you think about things in regards to being objective and you ask somebody what their opinion is and what their perspective is, it's also kind of nice to know why they believe it and where they got the information from. Right? I believe this because I heard it on the internet from somebody who's not an expert and doesn't have any, formal training in that, but they said that, so it must be true. Right? Or this person believes this, but it's an n number of one or two people that they're data points, and they're saying that this is universal to everybody, right? Like, that'll make no sense to me, right? But I tell my kids, you need to question me and your mom as well. I want you to be critical thinkers, period. No one should get mad at you by asking questions to try to inquire and understand their perspective and why they believe something. If they're coming from the right place, they should just be open to that, right? Wow, that's a good question. Versus being defensive because maybe they don't want to be challenged and they haven't really thought about it that much themselves. Some teachers are like that too, right? Why are you challenging me in class? Why are you asking all these questions? And for people who are religious, you can imagine when you're learning that religion, you start asking a bunch of questions about the Bible and stuff or whatever it may be, and that person was like, shut up. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't know the answer. Like, we'll talk about that later. Just believe me. Just believe me. Any thoughts? Any comments? Talk to me, y'all. What are you guys thinking?
I feel like I notice that in my mom sometimes. When she gives me certain advice, I'm having trouble thinking of a specific example,
Mhm.
but I'll notice, like, I don't know, it's kind of like really, you think that way? And I ask her, I try to check her on it, but she's like, yeah, that's how she's always thought. It's hard for her in specific to change the way that she thinks. But for me, when she tells me that, I'm like, I don't know, I gotta look into that. That doesn't make sense to me,
And I think that sometimes having the ability to do that, it just gives you a deeper understanding of the people in your life, the people who are in front of you. Like, you don't have to judge them. Everybody has their own perspective. Everybody has their own perception of what happens in their reality bubble, right? And whoever's interacting with the reality bubble and whatever's happening in my head and how I'm perceiving that and the feelings and the tones and all those things and the pain and the trauma that I have from other stuff, I'm all taking all of that in my reality bubble and I'm thinking this is the truth, right? When really it's not the truth, it's maybe your truth, but it's not the universal truth. And in today's society, we haven't been encouraging people to develop the ability to have perspective, to move outside of your reality bubble and to understand other people who are different than you, right? The news and the media is saying, no, they're going to feed you through an algorithm all the things that are part of your perception to reinforce that must be the truth. And it's separating people in a way where they're like, this happened. No, this happened. And what is the actual truth? Because all the news and stuff they're getting is feeding them that perception. And what I'm also saying right now is that in today's society, it's even that much more important for your ability to be able to discern information. And when I say discern, I'm not even saying solely discern it from a place of using your left brain and does this logically make sense? Because you can get tricked that way too. Oh yeah. But then how do you go to your gut? And how do you use your gut or intuitive instinct to be like, that don't smell right? No, I mean, I'm just saying, with AI and fake news and fake videos that can be created, there's a whole lot that can use trickery to get you to believe something that just isn't true. And if you can't go to that place where you can be like, it's calm and still, and I have a place, this is my place of knowingness, what does this really feel like? Then it is really easy to be duped. Talk to me, y'all. What you guys thinking? Because I've been saying a whole lot, and y'all real quiet. I see Eduardo grinning or whatnot. I know he usually has something to say, but he's on his best behavior. Okay, you guys are in absorption mode? Okay, acquisition mode? Go ahead, Stas.
When you analyze the other behaviors, do you have a diary? How can you remember that much information that's going on through your day by day?
That's a good question. Yes and no. I do have a diary. My diary isn't what happens to me during the day. My diary is when I meditate, my experiences that are happening and me documenting that. How people retain information, I think it goes back to maybe how you go about doing that in school, or what is your kind of natural way to, I'll use the word, make things sticky, right? So for me, because I'm very much a visual and kinesthetic feeling type of processor, I put things into stories, right? So when someone's telling me something, I kind of put that into a story, and then I ask questions about different points in the story that don't make sense to me, right? No, I mean, I'm just keeping it real. And then as you tell me your answer to it, at the same time, I'm also trying to pick up, whatever energy I'm getting from you. Do I really feel in that moment that you're being authentic? Are you kind of like, because anybody who's a good liar, and I used to be a professional when I was young, ask my mom, they know that they have to mix a little bit of truth in with the lie, right? Like if it's just a straight lie, they're gonna be like, nah. But if you mix a little bit of truth in there, then they're like, it seems, but you can throw them off your skin a little bit, right? But I'm trying to do that as you're talking to me too, to get a sense of like, no, I think Stas is kind of, he believes that, but it's not really what happened, right? So I'm doing all of that, and I'm putting it to the story, and I'm adding it as context around that story. And then when I store it, I can pull from that years to come. It's just, for me, it's easy for me to pull from that because I go about it in that way. Not for everything, but that's kind of my way. And people I'm friends with, they hate me because, whoa, this is funny. So I have some friends that are, I'll just say, very prominent and have power and resources. And a lot of times, when they tell you stuff, they'll leave out details because they really don't want you to know everything, because it may come back to haunt them, or they're just on purpose leaving out things because they don't want you to know, right? But I'm really good at tracking stuff. So I'll be hanging out with folks and they'll tell me some details. They won't tell me the person's name, right? And they'll give me all these details but won't give me their name. And then, you go out drinking a year or two later, they tell you some more details about it. I'm putting my story up. I'm still, adding into the stuff that I had before. Then they're not giving the name. And then, they get drunk one time, maybe 8 months later, and then the name comes out. Oh, like, that's the name? No. I'm like, no, I know the name now. Moving forward, we can say this name, and I just attach it to that story, and I got you. Or they'll say some stuff, and I'm like, no, you said something different before. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you said this. I'm like, yeah. They're like, why you bringing up old shit? But you don't know how many people I've outed. I got my cousin a month ago because she was dating somebody who was famous and in the Bay Area and didn't want to give me the name, but kept talking about the person and whatever they went through. I'm like, why are you not? I'm like, you act like I care about who the person's name is, right? But then she messed up and she gave me a data point of the person's birthday, and I triangulated it, and I went on my phone, was like, boop, 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 blah. And I was like, this is the word you're talking about? She was like, well, how would you? She got mad. I was like, quit playing. Like, it's just a puzzle, right? But I mean, why don't you just say the person's name? So anyway, it's just funny. Real funny. All right. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
That's one way, but there's multiple ways. And I think each person's kind of different. But the exercise, the lesson that we did on the art of asking questions, and we talked about how to create a story, how to look at the big picture and see how the details are intermined with the big picture, and how to have a building block where if I know this, then I know that. All those things are ways that you can conceptually hang information on and maybe pull from it later.
Yeah, I missed this workshop about art of asking questions.
Okay. All right, well, I think we do have a video, but we'll probably bring it up at some point this semester. All right, any thoughts, any comments about anything that we said thus far? All right, so if the culture and the timing is important, you know, it's this idea that we can ask questions of that person to discern if the information they're giving us is outdated or if it's timeless. Does the personality of the person giving the information influence how you receive it? So, for example, if this person is an introvert, someone's more introspective, someone who spends more time within, maybe doesn't get as much energy from being in big crowds and being without, or extrovert, someone who does get that kind of energy from being in crowds and being around people, does that kind of play into, and should you understand that as a way of weighing, should you be listening to that person or not? What are you thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if a person that is introvert and like not very a social person give me an advice or information about how to be a socialized, like I will question that.
Now, do you think it still would be valuable or not valuable?
Not valuable as an advice that I got from an extrovert.
Because you're more of an extrovert.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, what are you guys thinking about that? Want to add or subtract anything from that? Good.
Whether or not someone's an introvert or extrovert, I feel like that wouldn't really change the value of the advice or information that they're giving you. So that's why I kind of disagree with that.
Okay. So then would you want advice from both, or?
I mean, they would both be like of equal value in my opinion, so yeah, why not?
Okay. So what you're suggesting is that diversity of perspective still may have value to it, even if that person has a personality and or in one way versus the other. So that's something that I want you guys to think about, right? Say that I'm an introvert and you ask me, you know, what's the best way to get into a research lab, right? What's the best way to find a professor that you could maybe do research for at the university that you're at? And so my perspective as an introvert is, well, what I would do is the teaching assistants that you have in your classes, say you're taking biochemistry and there's a teaching assistant, a grad student that's running your section, somebody that you feel comfortable talking to because every week, once a week, when you have your special sections outside of the lectures, you get a chance to engage them. I would probably ask them, do they know any other grad students that are willing to take on an undergraduate student, right? Within your community of just grad students, can you actually maybe talk to some of your friends and see, you know, because I'm willing to work hard and, you know, these are my kind of grades, you kind of see me in this section, how I'm getting down in this class, but, you know, that may be their approach. And then they find a grad student, they interview with the grad student, and the grad student goes to the PI and says, yeah, I think I have space and time to train somebody. I found somebody that I'm interested in. Boom. The person gets the internship, or they get a chance to do research in that person's lab. But the extrovert is like, Oh yeah, no, I would go to the professor's office hours, or you know what I would do is I would send an email and see if I could do an informational interview with them, so I can kind of meet them, and I would actually read their research articles, and then maybe when I go to their lab, I would talk to them about the research, and then ask them, is it possible for me to meet people in your lab? Can you show me the equipment? Can you kind of show me some of the things that you're doing? And then turn around and ask the PI, well, you know, do you think anybody in your lab is open to to training me? They have a whole different approach based on their personality, but they both could be effective. And I want to know it all. Maybe my approach is a combination of both of those, but I want to know it all. Because I don't know what's going to work for me. Or maybe I try both. But it's something to think about is you still want to understand the perspective of that person who's giving you that advice so you can put it in whatever category in your mind to sort through if you think it's actually going to be good for you based on who you are or not. Because at the end of the day, the goal is, in my opinion, is to be authentically yourself. There's certain things that an extrovert cannot do in regards to how they engage people and their personality that someone who's an extrovert can do if that's just who they are. And it's always funny to me sometimes when I was in grad school, there wasn't a lot of people of color during that time period. I mean, it's me and another person who was black. But I had to find a way in the environment at UCSF to feel comfortable. So, I kind of naturally cuss a lot, and I'd be talking to professors, and I'd be cussing. I'd be like, yeah, shit, this, da, 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 da. And all of a sudden, the professor would be like, what kind of cuss back? And I'm like, hold up. I'm like, man, you don't even cuss. They're like, look at me. I was like, well, I said, you just cussing because you're around me right now and I'm cussing. I said, because when I say the word fuck, that shit sounds right because it flows off my mouth because that's what I know what I'm doing with it. And they were like, no, I really don't cuss, but I mean, Kevin, it was funny, bruh. But in the moment, I'm being authentically me. And I'm knowing when that other person is maybe trying to make a connection, but that's not really them. People know when people are kind of faking the funk. And at the end of the day, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, but you want to be damned being yourself because that's always going to be enough. People, in my opinion, want real connections to other people, not fake ones. Talk to me, y'all. What you guys thinking?
I agree with that. I mean, I've tried to, make myself palatable to other people when, I'm trying to make friends, and I think, it's a lot harder to make that connection when you're not, being yourself, and then also you pick up on it when, other people just, aren't really, being themselves, so, yeah, connection is just harder that way.
But you want it to be real. And I think that in human nature, people like being around folks that are really just being themselves, but it's hard sometimes, especially when we feel like we don't want to be judged or, being open in that way, there's some vulnerability there. But it's also maybe knowing within yourself that you're enough and that you have inherent value regardless if this person understands it, appreciates it, or even knows about it. Like if you know that within yourself, I have value. And you may or may not figure that out, but if not, then that's what's up. And if you do, then that's what's up. All right, you got a question there, Eduardo?
I think when we're trying to, to look for information, I mean, there are many factors involved on the search of that information, but to be honest, we know we're gonna be dealing with different personalities, and being an introvert person, really, I don't think it will decrement the value of the information that such person could provide to us. Um, I I think it will be harder. It will make you. I mean, you'll have to show more skills to get the information you're looking for from such type of person. But I mean, I don't think it's directly related to the value that such person could provide me regarding information. And I think no matter what kind of personality we're dealing with, uh, any information might be valuable.
Okay, all right. I appreciate you sharing. I mean, my pushback for the introvert is we don't want to misconstrue that someone who's an introvert isn't a deep thinker. Right? That has nothing to do with how deeply they think and how smart they are. And they could be the smartest person in the room, but you don't want to talk to them because they're an introvert. Quit playing. Right? And because they spend more time in their inner space, they may have a lot more awareness than someone who doesn't spend time in their inner space understanding themselves. But no, I want that person's information too. All right, so does the person giving the advice to you have a bias or a prejudice that would hinder the validity of his or her information? What type of questions would you ask the advice giver to aid you in discerning if his or her information is biased or prejudiced? Talk to me, y'all. How are we gonna figure that out?
I guess you could like ask them how they came to have that mindset, or like, did their friends or family tell them that? Like,
Okay. How did you come to have that mindset? And as they're sharing that with you, are you trying to place yourself into their perspective to understand them? Are you thinking about it objectively? Are you doing a little bit of both? Go ahead.
First, I will try to understand the person, like, what kind of attitude mindset does they have. And because, for example, I may ask someone that, how was the class that you took last semester? Because I'm planning to take that class next semester. They may say that, oh, the instruction was bad and I didn't like the class at all. But the thing that I will ask them would be, why do you think that the class was not good, and how was your strategy to work for that? I mean, I will try to understand his or her experience in the class that ended up with a bad result.
Okay. Ask questions on their experience and perspective. Yeah, you want to know that. And again, Stas, for somebody based on how they process information, for me as someone who's more of a kinesthetic processor, I'm going to try to place myself into your mindset, and I'm going to try to understand it based on how you feel, how you talk about it, what your tone is. I want to pretend like I'm you and be like, okay, so then what do we do? Right? And that's going to give me better feeling about what you're thinking and what you're feeling. That's just my way, right? And I'm going to ask you questions that maybe are poking you a little bit to see if you react to it. Right? And if you react to it, and if it's a trigger, ooh, there's something there. Damn, okay. You're not objective about that because you reacted. I need to incorporate that too into what you're saying because there may be some fire there because I see the smoke.
And also when you got treated by someone, you can reflect back on yourself. Why did you say that?
Okay. So that should be something that, again, you're going to probably store in a way where you're like, why did I get tricked? Was I naive? Was the delivery that and the information that they say, was it something that I wanted to hear? Right? And sometimes it's easy to get tricked when someone's telling us stuff that we want to be the truth. It's not the truth, but we want it to be the truth. There's a whole lot of people who are superstars and entertainers. They got people who are yes people telling them things that ain't the truth, but they're like, oh yes, you're just the greatest. Oh yeah, you're extraordinary. And they're like, yes, I am. Right? I mean, none of y'all though, you guys wouldn't be doing that. You guys have people around you, they're gonna bounce you out, right? Oh yeah, I'm sure. What else? What else are we gonna try to think about to figure out if this person is biased?
You could also ask them what they think on the alternatives. Like for example, if you're trying to make a decision and they're really insistent on you going this way, but you ask them what they think about the other ways, and if they're really reactive or if their thoughts aren't really deep or well thought out, you can kind of see that they're kind of a bit more close-minded.
Okay, I like that. What you think about alternative approach or perspectives? And I like the fact that you said, see how they react afterwards. That's part of the poking process. Anything else?
How would we direct and ask if this advice applies to all people or all circumstances?
Okay. To all people and situations. And I think sometimes too, if you ask the person how they got the information and they tell you a story about how they acquired it, you can learn a lot of information about the story and how they acquired it and how they were in that situation and how they were perceived by others in that situation and how they maneuvered within that situation. If that makes any sense. All right, Eduardo?
I think another way to kind of get an idea if the person where getting the information from is biased is once you know, or once we are sure about what's their take on the story, I mean, what side of the story they position at, to kind of I know this is very aggressive, but kind of criticize their side of the story and see how the defensive reaction they show to that criticism, and or do the opposite, just say good things regarding the opposite side that they position at, and see how they also are against of what you just say.
All right, I like that. So criticize the person and or the opposite and see how they respond? Okay, nice. All right, so in what ways can a person's race, their gender, or how he or she was socialized affect his or her perspective in a manner that doesn't align with your reality? So this is how this person sees the world, based on how they look, based on, how they present to the world, how the world may interact with them back, how does that information potentially gives you information about if the information is relevant or appropriate or valuable to you? Me personally, I like to engage folks who have gone through something. Like when I was, even now, but when I was a student and you'd have this person give a talk and they've accomplished these amazing things. This person started from nothing. They were able to acquire, hundreds of millions of dollars and start businesses and all that kind of stuff, right? So you have this person in front of you that's saying all these things, and I'm not focusing on their accomplishments. What I want to know is that when shit didn't work and you felt at your lowest and you didn't think you could get through it, how did you get through it? That's what I want to know, because then that's valuable information for me, where if I actually get to a place where I'm feeling the same way, your advice may be valuable. It may be something I can leverage and use in that moment. But the accolade piece, it's inspiring, but I don't know if in my deepest moments of insecurity and vulnerability, if that's going to be something that I need, that's going to help me push forward, right? But how that person potentially went through that challenging situation is still going to be colored by who they are as a person, and it could be based on their race or gender and all those other things. But I want to know that too. Not that it devalues it, it just gives me the different flavors of their advice based on how they view the world. What you guys thinking?
I definitely agree with that. But the personality, like introvert, extrovert, sometimes it's even an additional thing, because based on what they accomplished, that could be another barrier. It could be something going on with them up there that's might not be present, physical, like visible, but that could also be a thing. But I'll definitely receive it more I can understand the person.
And, we as humans, we have wisdom, and wisdom is developed in us through our experiences, but our experiences aren't universal, right? When and the lessons that, like, someone could have something atrocious happen to them, and through that, they learn the gift of forgiveness in a way that, like, you just would never get to that place if no one ever did anything to you that wasn't cool. So you may even be more petty around stuff, holding on to it forever versus letting it go. So let me give you guys an example. When I was a student, I used to get messed with by cops on almost every single college campus that I've been on. I don't know why, but it always happened, right? So anyway, I was at UCSF, and I was waiting out front of at night, the family housing unit for my boy to come out so we could study together. He was married, he was living in the family housing unit. So I was sitting out in my car, and all of a sudden these cops roll up, and blip, 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 blip. And they're like, what are you doing out here? Can you see da-da-da-da-da? And because we had 2 or 3 people call and say that there's somebody suspicious out there sitting in their car about to steal something, right? So anyway, I'm talking to the cop, and I was like, because he never asked me for my student ID. And so he's asking for my driver's license and why I'm out there. I said, I'm waiting for my friend. I was like, to study. You're a student here? I'm like, yeah. sitting in the car waiting for, I'm like, my friends are gonna be out in like 10 minutes anyway, you know, like whatever, right? But I remember the cop, right? So a week or two later, I'm in the elevator, you know, I'm like, what's up? I know you and you know me, right? He's like, oh yeah, how's it going, right? Right? So anyway, I wasn't staying towards him, but of course I remembered his face, right? Now fast forward 7 years later. Finished there, got my PhD, woo. I had started a nonprofit organization. We were putting a big event on at that school called the Scientific Empowerment Movement. I had these entertainers coming to perform at UCSF. I had hundreds of students coming from all over the Bay Area, and he was the cop that was gonna help secure the talent in that space. And I was like, hey man, what's up? And he was looked at me, he was like, oh, I was like, now you remember me now, you know? But in that moment, I let it go. I could have kept that stank there, and I could have been poking him for a long time, but I was like, and after the event, he was like, this is one of the best events that we had at UCSF, and I'm so glad that I had a chance to be a part of it. And so, but my point being is that through life sometimes, we get wisdom in these different areas because of how we were born, what area we were raised in, what perspective, what the financial situation, all those things still play into that, and we can still gain wisdom that other people may not have experienced that still could be valuable to us if we're open to it. And I'm just saying, I want to know that information. Anything that anybody has that could be of value to me, I want to be open to it, and I want to know it. All right, anything else? You guys want to talk about that? All right, so the last piece is, do you believe the information the person is giving you is accurate? Yes, that's just the bottom line. Is the information actually accurate? Can the person admit when they're wrong? They're always right. They can never admit when they're wrong. And I always watch people who generalize stuff. Like people who are scientists, scientifically trained, we don't generalize anything. We don't say, oh, everybody da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, oh, everybody. Right? Scientists parse their words more than lawyers. Because when you do an experiment, the outcome can indicate something which is different than suggest something that's different than this is necessary versus different than this is required. All of those words mean something different. And a scientist will eat you up if you've used one of those without context. They were like, oh, so it's necessary? Well, what experiments did you do to prove that it's necessary? Right? Oh, it's required. Okay, so then when you take this out, it shuts the whole system down? Versus always suggest this. Okay, you guys are moving towards that. Right? All those words mean something different. So I wouldn't generalize anything, but people who generalize stuff, I just make that mental note. Okay, they don't watch their words, and then they'll just overlay their experience on everything in that whole person, that whole culture, that whole whatever. And it lets me know something about you. So, one of the things that I used to do, and this is just, again, I wasn't the smartest person, but I felt like I had a little bit of street smarts. And so, I had to stay in my lane and do the things I need to do to figure out what the hell's going on in the game, right? So anytime I wanted to do an experiment, especially if I'm doing an experiment that's new, I would of course read about the experiment, try to, acquire the information, and I have a perspective, this is what my approach should be, but I'm going to talk to at least 3 people, right? I'm going to go talk to Yogi. I'm going to be like, you know what? You got that experiment to work. After a couple times, this is what I'm thinking. What you think. And you're like, oh, you need to do this, this, and that. I got this to work on this 3rd time, what I'm saying, because I did boom, 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 boom. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. Then I'm going to talk to you because you couldn't get that experiment to work for a whole year. And your information in my mind is way more valuable than his because you know a lot of different ways of how things could go wrong. Right? So you're like, oh no, you haven't thought about boom, 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 boom. I'm just like, oh damn, okay, let me write all that stuff down. That's what's up. Then I'm gonna talk to one other person to put the cherry on top, and then I'm gonna figure out what I want to do. And maybe it's 20% of what you said, maybe it's 40% of what you said, and nothing of what the other person said, or maybe it's 90% of what I was gonna do anyway before I even started talking to y'all. But I want to know, right? I want all that different perspective before I get down in the game. To figure out what's going to be right for me in my unique situation that is inherently different than yours because I'm discovering something new and it's not the same protein or chemical, whatever, right? All of those things means that it's inherently different. But we're still trying to take the same approach to see what that outcome is going to look like. Right? So, what things do people do when they want to try to understand if the information that someone's giving them is accurate or is the best advice for you? Is there anything else that you guys can think of?
Asking for the resource, like they learn about it, or like how much time did it take for them to understand that this is not working.
So you want to understand the steps they took and the time that they took to kind of get things to work?
Yeah, and if it's an information, I will say like where did they learn about it.
Okay. Steps, process, time, and info. Okay.
I want to know the perspective. And, just how they even began the whole process, why they began, where they began. And just see where I can relate to. If I can relate to it, and then, if not, then more questions.
Okay. Anything else? The accuracy, go ahead.
I think you could even look it up nowadays yourself, on Google, be resourceful and be like, okay, is what this person telling me actually factual or not?
Okay, so research info and problem. All right. I got Iman.
I think getting a second opinion could also help you.
All right, second opinion. Eduardo.
I was gonna say compare the information with the information we could get from others.
Okay. Protein, second opinion, okay, from others. All right, anything else? Go ahead.
Just what inspired them to even, get to that. Also, inspiration, motivation, something like that.
Okay, what inspired you?
The drive, inspired drive, same thing.
Approach. And, really understanding what inspires somebody or what their approach is, I believe is valuable because that approach or that inspiration may be totally different than how you process and bring in information. And I think the two extremes are someone who makes discoveries through the kind of logical, methodical, fact-based knowledge sense, that left brain, and folks that make it through that intuitive, maybe I had a vision, maybe I had a dream, that space. And maybe something in between. Those are the two extremes. And a lot of science discoveries come from that intuitive space. Like there's a story of this professor who's at Davis, who's a mathematician, and for his PhD, he solved some theorem or whatever that people were working on for like hundreds of years during his PhD. It was way more than he needed to do to get a PhD. But when he talked about it, he talked about how when he was dreaming at night, that these symbols and stuff would be floating through the sky to him, and he had his journal next to him, and he started writing them down. And at the very end, when he saw the theorem, he said these clouds parted, and the last formula came to him, and he was able to solve it. I'm just saying what I'm saying. I can sit here and tell you that the theory or the model that I created for the work that I was doing in grad school on how these proteins are potentially translationally regulating RNA transcripts came to me drinking a 40 ounce of a beer at my house, right? I'm just keeping it 100. I was drinking my little beer, and I always had a little whiteboard at my house, right? So I was drinking my little beer, and I was, half drunk and stuff, and I was like, ooh. And I just started drawing the thing on my little whiteboard, and it just felt right. And I was like, okay. It was like, yeah, I put everything on it. It's this, right? I didn't say nothing to nobody, right? But I was doing some experiments, right? And in my experiments, some of the things in my little model, some of the proteins in my little model were coming out of my experiments. I was like, ooh, yeah. And okay, so I went to my boss, right? And I'm like, Renee, I said, I came up with this model. I think that these RNA transfers are getting regulated from the tail and the front through these proteins, this combinatorial approach. And I was breaking it down to her, and she's like, well, why are you thinking that? I just said, I don't know, it just felt right. She's like, no one's thinking that way. And I was like, she was like, nah, I don't think it's that. I was like, okay, all right. And then a week went by, and then she was like, hey, Fred, I've been thinking about your model. I think it, there's some stuff to it. I was like, yeah, but it probably ain't right. I'm like, yeah, I could be petty too, I got issues, or I had them back then. Then another week went by, and she's like, Fred, I'm feeling your model. You mind if I write a grant to the National Institute of Health based on your model? I'm like, I don't care. Bring some money in. She writes the grant. We get funded for $1.4 million. I get a chance to hire a whole bunch of people to work for me. Boom, the model gets validated. But it came from drinking a 40. That's my point, right? Right, I'm talking smack. But at the same time, what I'm saying is that understanding someone's approach can potentially allow you to adapt that and see if it works for you. But you kind of want to know it, if you can, right? In my mind, there's a loosening of, I've been at a point when I was studying in school where my mind was very rigid, like I had to do things a certain way because this is the way the professor's saying I need to understand it, right? I've been in that place of saying, no, this is the approach. It has to be this way. And then there's a loosening to well, what does your mind really want to do? Right? And do I give it permission to maybe think differently? And it's scary at first because do I put my whole grade in the class based on that when I can kind of mimic what this other person's thinking and maybe get the outcome that way? Or do I give my mind the permission to kind of do its own thing? But what I'm actually saying to you is that I'm giving you permission to do that. I feel like that's the most powerful way to activate the unique gifts and talents that you have. And when I was able to do that, then I found these different ways to get the same answer. True story. I'm taking Physics 7C equivalent at Berkeley. I think it's equivalent to Physics 4C and D. And we took this exam, and however I solved this problem on this exam, I guess I solved it in a way that no one had done before. And the professor, he took me into his office hours. He's like, come in here. He's like, how did you solve this problem? He's like, break down to me your logic and your thinking on how you solve this problem. So I went to the board and I broke it down. And he was like, I've been a professor here for 15 years, and I have never seen one solve the problem the way that you just did right there. And he was like, what do you want to do in the future? And I was like, I want to be a geneticist. He's like, if you ever want a letter of recommendation from me, I will write you a letter. That I was like, in my mind, like, man, I want a letter from you. I don't even know you. And since you asked me about a letter, I don't know if I trust you, right? But my point being is that that's the place in my mind that's going to allow you to be extraordinary. But it's a muscle that you have to learn how to loosen up and give yourself permission to go to that place over the rainbow, to think, to absorb, to express, to give that output. And then people will pay you a whole lot of money for your energy because they can't potentially do what you do. All right, any last thoughts or comments as we kind of close things down? All right, so in summary, it's this idea of when we have people in our life that are mentors, and I'm just going to say this up front, even the word mentor, like, that's a pretty big word that has a whole lot of responsibility to it. You know, a person may be like, you know what, I don't know if I want to be your mentor. What I got to do, do I got to meet up with you every month? You know, do I got to, take you out to eat lunch and do X, Y, and Z? Am I responsible for your actions? Right? But, but if you think about somebody who maybe you want to get advice from, that person doesn't have to be one person. It can be multiple people. You can have your own council of folks that can give you different perspectives for the things that you want. And if you go to somebody who may be busy or has a lot of time, but you're going to them with a very specific question, then maybe it's a lot easier for this person to make time for you. I mean, I just need 5 minutes, I just need 10 minutes for you on Zoom. And you go there and it's like, this is what I need for you as somebody that, I trust your thoughts and your perspective, and then you still weigh all the things that we talked about today, no matter what. But each person, in my opinion, really needs to, if you want to call it, create your own board of directors, if you were the corporation, that all have different gifts than one another. They don't need to be the same kind of thinking type person. And you can use them as your counsel, as you navigate life. And they can be the person that's the first, second, or third person that's give you different opinions on maybe what you want to do, if it's changing majors from biology or microbiology to bioengineering or whatever it may be, right? You have multiple counsel there, and you can kind of weigh the perspective of each person who's giving you that and get to what feels right for you. But at the end of the day, what I'm also saying is that I really believe that you have that answer within you. And you have to find a way to go within yourself and pull that out. Maybe other people's perspectives are giving you insights or inspiration to what that is. But you have to, in my opinion, find a way to trust yourself and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I appreciate all these other things because they helped me get to that place. But I still got quiet and went within myself and was like, this is what I think I want to do because it feels right for me. All right, any last thoughts or comments before we kind of shut things down? All right, so what I want you guys to do to make sure you get credit for coming to this workshop is to log into the